This is a mask from all over the country. I'm getting these masks.
Real men wear masks, and these masks are essentially important. The chair views the failure to wear a mask as a serious breach of decorum. I have no advice for them, except when they come here, they have to wear a mask.
But in any case, I'm a big believer in wearing the mask and not sharing any, shall we say, air unnecessarily.
Yeah. So the real justification for mask mandates was right in the middle of that montage of clips. Quote, failure to wear a mask is a serious breach of decorum, Nancy Pelosi says. And she means it. And that's why in Napa, her little brown servants wear masks as they bring her wine. Decorum demands that they do. If there has ever been a clear window into their plans, into the society they are trying to build now, we're not aware of it. Our formerly middle-class nation now has a serf class, and they're the ones wearing the masks. They're the ones being forced to take drugs they don't want. They're the ones being told not to communicate with one another except through the digital channels the party controls. Social distance. We now have two groups of Americans, not a broad middle. We have the favored and the unfavored. We have the saved and the damned. We have the vaccinated and the unvaccinated. That is exactly how the architects of all of this see the country. Michael Hayden once ran the two most powerful spy agencies in America, the CIA and the NSA. Yesterday, a Twitter user asked him this question, quote, can we send the MAGA-wearing unvaxxed to Afghanistan? Yes, replied Michael Hayden, good idea. That's how contemptuous they feel about you. Shut up and fetch another glass of Riesling, serf, and be sure not to breathe on me or you'll be deported. These are bad attitudes, and they're accelerating. How far can they go? Well, for the answer, look to New Zealand, a famously placid outpost in the fast-shrinking Anglosphere. A single COVID case in New Zealand, not a death from COVID, but a case of COVID, has shut down the entire country. New Zealanders have now been told they are not allowed to speak to their neighbors.
Stay local and do not congregate. Don't talk to your neighbors. Please keep to your bubbles. It comes down again to those very simple principles. We know from overseas cases of the Delta variant that it can be spread by people simply walking past one another. So keep those movements outside to the bare minimum, wear a mask, and make sure you keep up that physical distancing.
Do you hear that? By the way, the lady with the teeth is very popular with people like Michael Hayden. She's considered super impressive, visionary, really. Don't talk to your neighbors, stay in your bubble. That's New Zealand. But it's freer than Australia. In Australia, the government has implemented total lockdowns nationwide and then imposed martial law to enforce those lockdowns. What's the justification for this? Well, here are the numbers. From mid-July until last week, the entire nation of Australia, that's 25 million people, has averaged about 1.5 COVID deaths per day out of 25 million people. And that has been enough to justify the end of Australia and totalitarianism. In one recent case, which really does say it all, authorities executed rescue dogs, shot the dogs to death to prevent Australian dog lovers from traveling to adopt the dogs. Leaving your home is no longer allowed. So they just killed the dogs. And the population put up with it. They were told they had to. Nightly news in Australia now looks like a science fiction film. One recent report described a 27-year-old fugitive. Was he a mass killer? No. He had dared to venture outside of his apartment complex. For doing that, for leaving the building, the media showed surveillance footage of the man entering an elevator and then, brace yourselves, sneezing without covering his face. There was no one else in the elevator at the time. For that, there is now a nationwide manhunt underway. An arrest warrant for this man has just been issued. We're not making this up. And that man is not the only person the Australian media and police are hunting for tonight. One Australian news outlet just reported, and we're quoting, "A tip to Crime Stoppers has blown the lid on a church service attended by 60 adults and children. The gathering has been described as selfish and arrogant," end quote, for going to church. So what else in Australia is now considered, quote, selfish and arrogant? It's not just going to church or leaving your apartment or trying to adopt a dog. watching the sunset is also selfish and arrogant. Watch.
There's a whole bunch of people down the Ryback Beach last night who thought the best thing to do is to go and watch the sunset. I'm sure it was a beautiful sunset. But that's not in the spirit or in the letter of these rules.
Scolded for watching the sunset, executing rescue dogs, a nationwide manhunt for a guy who sneezed alone in an elevator. No one in Australia is laughing at this. No one can stand back far enough to see the lunacy on display. They're too far gone. This has been in the works for a long time, by the way. A situation like this does not happen overnight, long before COVID. In 2016, the government of Australia ended almost all legal protections for public protests. And at the time, people tolerated it. They trusted their government. They didn't think it was necessarily a big deal. So on Saturday this weekend, as protesters gathered in Melbourne, the government used its new authority to silence them.
What did I breach? What did I... Someone get kept here! Put your hands behind your back! Put your hands behind your back! Put your hands behind your back!
If that were Iran, if that footage was shot in Tehran over the weekend, we'd all tug our chins and say, of course, the mullahs, they're not like us. But it's not Iran, it's not North Korea, it's Australia, what we thought was a rules-based society. What law did I break? You heard the protester ask as he's being beaten and handcuffed. That might have been a good question to ask a few years ago, but of course now it's too late. And you can see what happens when a nation tolerates authoritarianism even for a moment. So you can either rebel immediately and say, we're not putting up with this, I'm sorry, we're free people in a free country. San Francisco did that in 1918 when the hypocrisy of their leadership became obvious. Or you can sit back and watch it accelerate, and in the end you'll wind up like Australia, and they'll shoot your dog. Matt Walsh is host of The Matt Walsh Show. He joins us tonight. Matt, thanks so much for coming on. We appreciate it. So much to get to, but it does feel like this is a pivot point. It's been a year and a half of this stuff. It's getting more intense. The crackdowns harder to justify scientifically, more obvious, the hypocrisy of our leaders. How do we respond in the face of this?
Well, I think, first of all, when it comes to Australia, there is a sort of there's something poetic about seeing the country come full circle and back around to being a prison colony again, which is basically what it is there. And I think when we look at that, what we see, as you pointed out, that if the people will tolerate it, then the people in charge of the country will do it. So they'll go as far. There's nothing new or terribly shocking about that. The founders of our country realized that was the case, which is why you have to put these protections in place, because the people in charge of a country, any country, will impose as much tyranny as they can possibly get away with. And in Australia, the people have put up with quite a bit. And I think we have here too. I'd also point out something else, that when it comes to Nancy Pelosi or any of these familiar scenes of our ruling class gallivanting around when they think no one's looking and they don't have masks on, I think we have to resist the urge to say this is hypocrisy, this is a double standard. It actually isn't. I think they're pretty straightforward about this. There is a single standard here, which is if you're an important person, then your life matters, and you should be able to basically live as you want. But if you're an unimportant person, if you're a peon like most of us, then you just have to put the mask on and go with the flow. It's kind of like they look at us like you might look at a lizard in an aquarium and sort of say, well, I feel kind of bad that he's trapped in the aquarium, but then again, all of his needs are taken care of, and who cares if he enjoys life that much? He's just a lizard. I think that's how they look at us. They say, what does it matter? Just put the freaking mask on. Put the mask on your kid for 8 hours a day. What is it? Why should it matter to you? You know, your life just isn't as important as ours. I think that's their attitude, and they're pretty straightforward about it.
Man, I'm too old for this. I grew up in a country where people literally said regularly, I'm a taxpayer. In other words, I have rights, I'm a citizen, you have to treat me like an adult man. I can't remember the last time I heard anyone say I'm a taxpayer, because nobody cares.
Yeah, and that's, I think people, first of all, a lot of the people aren't taxpayers who are, I think that's part of the plan here is to, we know we're going to suspend rent, we're going to send out all these checks, we've got 10 million jobs available and nobody wants them. So that's part of the problem. And also, I think at like a deeper level, we have to go even deeper and see what's going on culturally, where so many people have been scared senseless that they'll go along with this. And I think on some level, it's like we have had to confront our mortality for the first time in this culture, and a lot of people don't know how to handle it.
That is so true, what you just said. That is so true. Matt Walsh, appreciate you coming on tonight.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
There's a lot of fakeness in this country, but is there a corporation in America faker than Patagonia? It's a marketing company that poses as a mountaineering expedition in order to sell shoddily made plastic clothing to nonprofit executives who rarely go outside. Patagonia's promotional materials describe its total dedication to fighting climate change, but somehow they forget to mention that its entire product line is made from fossil fuels. Patagonia is the kind of place that will give you a lecture about fair trade and corporate responsibility, even as it outsources its own manufacturing to grubby sweatshops in the world's most impoverished countries. Enjoy your $300 casual wear hoodie, Mr. Sierra Club fundraiser. Some kid in Sri Lanka got 20 cents to make it. Patagonia may be the single most audacious scam in all of American business, and that's saying something. So it probably shouldn't surprise you that Patagonia has now decided it should control American politics. Earlier this month, a group of Republican office holders, including former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, members of Congress Jim Jordan and Marjorie Taylor Greene, flew to Jackson, Wyoming for a private fundraiser. Now, by itself, this was not unusual. Raising money in resort towns is what politicians do in August. Unfortunately, the group forgot to ask Patagonia first. When Patagonia executives discovered that Republicans had traveled to Wyoming without their permission, they threw a fit. They announced a boycott of the entire Jackson Hole ski resort. Their reasoning? Their company, they explained in a press release, supports, quote, a strong democracy. Of course, a strong democracy. Democracy is a system where a small group of smug inherited money billionaires decide who's allowed to speak in public and who had better shut up or face punishment. Now, we used to call that system oligarchy, but the term had an unpleasant authoritarian ring. So the marketing geniuses at Patagonia renamed it. It's now called democracy. That's a little like taking spun polyester fiber made from oil and calling it shearling wool, which comes from sheep, and hoping no one will notice. In fact, come to think of it, Patagonia has done that too. The southern border is wide open tonight. The rest of the world is streaming in by the millions. Officials are now worried it may be used by terrorists, and of course it will be. Right now on TuckerCarlson.com, you can order a signed copy of The Long Slide. There are some still available. We'll be right back.
Have already begun.
Sean breaks down the latest on the Taliban takeover tonight on Hannity.
Call J.J. Wentworth.
The rest of the world continues by the millions to stream across our southern border tonight. There is no effective border control. Who are these people coming from around the world into the United States? Tonight there are concerns about who exactly those people might be. Fox's Bill Malugin is there at the border for us. Bill, good to see you.
Hey, Tucker, good to see you. Look, never a dull moment down here at the border. As we were getting ready to go live this morning, take a look at this video we shot. We had a group of runners just randomly come zipping across right through us, mostly single adult men who had clearly just crossed the border illegally and obviously did not want to be caught by Border Patrol. They took off into a cotton field and just disappeared. Well, the thing was, there were no Border Patrol agents anywhere to be seen. It appeared that group just got away. And this is something that's been happening more and more out here every day as more border agents are being pulled off the front lines to help with paperwork and processing, and many agents feel like they're just social workers now, and that's leaving parts of the border open and exposed, and Republicans have some concerns about that. Take a look at this. House Republicans actually just penned a letter to DHS Secretary Mayorkas saying they have concerns about the open border down here and with what's going on in Afghanistan, writing in part, quote, with the recent release of thousands of Taliban prisoners located at Bagram Air Force Base and a U.S. border that is a border in name only, this combination will be disastrous when it comes to protecting our homeland and the safety and security of the American people. It would be foolish to pretend our adversaries don't know our southern border is seeing record numbers of illegal entries. They went on to say they want him to explain what his plan is to protect the homeland and also how they're going to be tracking these potential terrorists who have been released from prison. Also concerns about COVID down here. Take a live look at our Fox drone overhead where we are at here in Ansel Dewis Park. This is that emergency tent compound the city of McAllen built a few weeks ago. This is for COVID-19 positive migrants who have been released by Border Patrol. You can see how big it's gotten. Capacity started at 250. Now the capacity well over 2,000. There are several hundred people in there right now. And the city of McAllen reported tonight the COVID positivity rate for migrants dropped off by Border Patrol is currently 14.7%. We'll send it back to you.
Bill Melugin for us at the border. Keep in mind, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, could fix it tomorrow by deploying the Texas National Guard to the border and doing what the federal government won't, but he refuses. The Pentagon spokesman just said thousands of American citizens remain trapped in Afghanistan tonight. He said he didn't know the exact number, that it's just thousands. Many of them can't apparently get to the border because the Taliban control the roads. According to the White House, ISIS is also operating near the airport, but today Joe Biden's flack denied that any of those American citizens in Afghanistan are, quote, stranded.
I think it's irresponsible to say Americans are stranded. They are not. We are committed to bringing Americans who want to come home. We are in touch with them via phone, via text, via email, via any way that we can possibly reach Americans to get them home if they want to return home.
There are no Americans stranded is the White House's official position on what's happening in Afghanistan right now.
I'm just calling you out for saying that we are stranding Americans in Afghanistan.
You know, you've reached a peak lunacy when the Biden administration calls other people irresponsible. Okay. So what should we know about Afghanistan? What is actually happening there right now? Laura Logan is one of the few who does know. She hosts Laura Logan Has No Agenda on Fox Nation. She lived in Afghanistan. She joins us tonight. Laura, thanks so much for coming on. So what should we know? What can we trust about what's actually happening tonight in Afghanistan?
Well, as you know, Tucker, I try to focus on what are really the defining things, right? Because there's a lot of misinformation and propaganda being pushed by the administration and by the Taliban and so on. But what is at the heart and the core? Well, for example, the most important thing that I think Americans should understand is that both this country's enemies and the Biden administration want you to accept that there is nothing that can be done. That this outcome that you see, where the United States, a world superpower, is humiliated, defeated, and shamed on the world stage, that it bows at the knee, you know, takes a knee and bows at the feet of terrorists, that we have to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government of Afghanistan, that Afghans haven't fought and aren't fighting right now, that there's no resistance. This foregone conclusion, right, is what they want you to accept. Because as long as we're talking and arguing about how many American citizens are left behind and so on, we're not talking about the fact that all of these decisions that brought us here are political. Every single one of them. Yes, there were many failures along the way, but the framework within the generals, you know, operate is a political framework. The commander-in-chief is a politician, not a military man, and they love to remind us all of that. So the political decisions that resulted in this outcome have not changed one bit. There is nothing that is altered. They're not using any of the levers of power in any dimension, not political, not diplomatic, not economic, not security-wise, not military. So you have to look at that and say, well, okay, they're getting the outcome they want, because they could bomb the Taliban into the Stone Age, right? Like that. They could, you know, destroy all those weapons that are in place. They could tell Pakistan to stop, cease and desist right now, or we're cutting off the money and we're putting sanctions on you. They could tell the Qataris, stop doing these big, evacuations of Afghan women, the robotics team and the mountaineering team. When you're funding the Taliban and you finance this invasion, use the levers of your power. And then let's not forget the advanced military technology that the United States military has. I mean, the kind of things, we have thermal drones that can see through walls, okay? Throughout the entire war in Afghanistan, none of this capability has been used. And so that's a broader question as to why not. But the real question here is, why are we accepting that all of these women in Afghanistan, are condemned to a death sentence, right? And a life that all their dreams are obliterated, when we could actually do something about it? The Chinese are they're crowing today. They're all over Xinhua, the state news agency, and they're mocking Joe Biden, they're mocking the United States. And so we are accepting this defeat that puts this country in jeopardy. And the second thing that I think is a defining real question here is we are also accepting the idea that if you criticize this, you're advocating to stay in Afghanistan, and that is false. There are many other options without staying in Afghanistan, and most importantly, this is not just about Afghanistan. This doesn't just empower Al-Qaeda and the terrorists in Afghanistan. It empowers every enemy the United States has. It doesn't just discourage the allies we have in Afghanistan. It tells every nation on earth, we are a terrible ally. With friends like us, you don't need enemies. We can't do this alone. For our security globally, we need friends. When we needed help, we went to the Afghans and we said, please help us. And I'll tell you what an Afghan leader said to me today. He said, every meeting with the U.S. began with, we won't betray you again, we won't abandon you again. We made a mistake after the Cold War, and I promise you, this time we won't do it. And then the Iranians would come into the next meeting and they would say, America will abandon you again. We are your neighbor. We'll be here when they do. And what you're seeing is the Biden administration proving that every enemy of America and everything they've ever said about this country is the truth.
There's going to be a major realignment, obviously. And I agree with your point that just because you criticize this does not mean you're arguing for another 20 years of occupation. There are other options. Laura Logan, I appreciate your coming on. We have one of the most interesting conversations ever on this subject with Laura on a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson Today for over an hour. You can stream it on Fox Nation, and we hope you will. Laura, thanks.
Thank you, Tucker.
So this show has just obtained exclusively documents that show how the Biden administration is vetting the thousands of Afghans making their way to this country. Pretty shocking. Straight ahead. So we know a lot of Afghan refugees are coming here. How many exactly? Where are they going? How are they being processed when they get here? We have answers to some of those questions tonight. Here's what we've learned from government sources. Dulles Airport right outside Washington is a main welcoming site for flights landing at all hours of the day filled with Afghan refugees. As of this morning, just under 3,700 men from Afghanistan have been processed at Dulles. One recent flight landed there with nearly 200 evacuees. Homeland Security officials are currently discussing opening similar sites at other airports around the country. DHS has also been soliciting volunteers to staff its processing centers overseas. There are currently 3 of those that are vetting refugees in Bahrain, Qatar, and Germany. The administration is planning to open 4 other overseas processing sites. DHS's goal, it says, is to process 10,000 refugees every day at many of these overseas locations. So we reached out to DHS for comment on Friday. A spokesman there said that they are, quote, working around the clock to ensure individuals are screened against U.S. government databases prior to arriving in the U.S. and upon arrival. These are the people who had no idea the Taliban were going to take Kabul in a weekend. What will happen? Well, their attitudes, a lot of good people, but are very different from those of most Americans. A new poll by Pew found that 99% of Afghan Muslims support, for example, enacting Sharia law. So many Republicans in Congress have no problem with this at all. In fact, some of those want us to evacuate Afghans from Kabul before we get all Americans, citizens, out of the country. One of those Republicans, not surprisingly, is Ben Sasse of Nebraska, the single guiltiest white man in America. Sasse said over the weekend that we need to take in as many refugees as possible because America has given its word. He didn't say to whom. J.D. Vance is putting a finer point on that. He's running for Senate from Ohio. He joins us tonight to respond. Now, I don't mean to attack Ben Sasse, but there is this kind of mode of communication that a certain sort of person uses to communicate that rather than explaining why it's in the interest of the country to do something, they just sort of attempt to seize the moral high ground and then lecture you because they have unresolved emotional problems themselves. How do you respond to Ben Sasse's claim that we have a moral obligation to do this?
Well, I'm happy to attack Ben Sasse, Tucker, and if folks want to help our campaign, by the way, they can go to jdvance.com. But look, Ben Sasse speaks in platitudes. There's no substance in what he actually says. So he says that we gave our word. Well, who did we give our word to? Where is this contract that says that we have to take tens of thousands of poorly vetted Afghan refugees at the height of chaos? The person who made that contract, who signed that contract, would be a terrible negotiator. I know that Donald Trump didn't do it. Did Joe Biden do it? Did somebody else do it? Because we should be putting the interests of our own citizens first. And if our government's making promises to other people, to other refugees, then let's be honest about it, but stop with these ridiculous platitudes because they don't actually mean anything unless there's substance behind it.
Like, what are the promises that our government makes to the American public? So 70,000 people die of drug ODs. The FDA made that possible by approving all this poison into rural America. Was that a violation of a promise that our government made us? I mean, what are we guaranteed by the U.S. government? Any idea?
Yeah, exactly. The Constitution really is a compact between our government and our citizens about what the government owes us. And just think about these ridiculous politicians. Unfortunately, too many Republicans who say things like, well, we want all of these Afghan refugees in our neighborhood. I mean, who really believes that? You cited the Pew Research poll. Another finding from that poll suggests that 40% of Afghan refugees, or excuse me, 40% of Afghans believe that suicide bombing is a reasonable way to solve a problem. Who wants people like that in their community? Of course, 60% of Afghans don't believe that, but when you're not vetting people properly, you're going to get a lot of bad people in your communities. So let's just be honest about the fact that if we want to have a real country, we need to make sure that good people are coming into this country. There are ways to help the Afghans who really did help our military without sending tens of thousands of unvetted people into our country. And the fact that our politicians aren't honest about that trade-off suggests they're either hiding something or they're just stupid. Either way, it's not very good.
Well, they don't care about the details because they don't care about the country. That's, I think, the answer. If you treated your kids like this and sort of anyone could share their bedroom, your kids would know you don't really love them. And I think that we should take that same lesson. J.D. Vance, I appreciate your coming on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a senior official at ICE just quit his job because he was told he was not allowed to enforce the law he was sworn to uphold. He joins us to explain what's happening in our government. That's straight ahead. Welcome back. So Donald Trump left, Joe Biden came in office. We've been paying a lot of attention to the Biden administration, but on the left, some people are totally on board with the authoritarianism that we're now surrounded by, but others are starting to rethink whether this is a good idea. Bill Maher appears to be one of them. On Friday, he said a lot of things on his show that he would not have said a year ago. This is interesting. Watch this.
We know 78% of the people who have died or went to the hospital, obese. You wouldn't worry so much about a mask if you weren't part of, I just read the statistics. 4 out of 5 people who wind up dead, this is the reason. I mean, I don't want a booster. Look, I never wanted the vaccine. I took one for the team. And by the way, you know who doesn't get a lot of vaccines? The millennials. I know a lot of millennials, especially the 20-year-olds. They don't want it. They don't want it. They don't think they need it. They're probably right. But I tell them, I didn't want it either. I took one for the team. But a boost, but every 8 months you're going to put the in me? I don't know about that. Maybe I don't need one. I don't want a one-size-fits-all. My body may be different than your body.
Notice the audience only applauds when he says, I took one for the team. They're not sure if you're allowed to say things like this, but he is saying them. What is this about exactly? Jason Whitlock has been watching. He's written a really smart new column about the end of the anti-Trump resistance and what it means. He's the host of Fearless with Jason Whitlock, which he certainly is, and we're happy to have him on tonight. Jason, thanks so much for coming on. So you've been paying closer attention than a lot of us to what's happening, broadly speaking, on the left in the Democratic Party. What do you think it is exactly?
Tucker, I'm a huge Bill Maher fan, have been for a long time. I think it's clear he's been red-pilled, or the left has moved so far into insanity, he can no longer defend them. And so every week he's coming out trashing the left, trashing the insanity of the woke movement. And I think that most, and I say this in all seriousness, I think that most people that adopt this liberal philosophy and the agenda of progressives, they're doing it because they've been forced to. They don't want to be framed as racist. They don't want to be framed as sellouts. I think Trump is the house of cards. The Trump card is the house of cards the Democratic Party is standing on right now. If you remove Trump and force them to actually defend their positions and the things that they're doing in this country, they can't do it. And so Friday night, Bill's having a conversation about Afghanistan, and the lady from the LA Times, all she could say was, oh, it would be worse if Trump were in office. And Bill was like, how? I mean, that's not an answer. And it's ridiculous that their entire platform is, oh, it could be worse if Trump were in office. They got to come better than that. It's a fraud. To some degree, I kind of wish like Trump would step aside so that everyone can see the fraudulence, and so that Bill Maher and other smart people, honest people, could start attacking the positions that are undermining and destroying this country.
What do you think? I've always wondered this. Like, what is the actual support for the ideas? Not, you know, do you like Trump or Biden? But, for example, do you think men can get pregnant? Or do you think some races are morally superior to other races? Like, the core idea is the Democratic Party. How many Americans actually believe that stuff, would you guess?
I don't think 5% of America believes it, maybe 10%.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tucker, I'm going to say something that's difficult to unpack in this short amount of time, but it's what I truly believe. I think a lot of what the left supports is satanic. I'm just sorry. It's in direct objection to God and in direct objection to the Judeo-Christian values that were at the foundation of this country. And those Christian values are why we made so much progress in terms of freedom and humanity and the way we treat everybody. Yes, it was hard, but our Christian values compelled us to sacrifice our lives for the freedoms of other Americans, of slaves. And through the civil rights movement, our Christian values compelled us to take risks and fight for equality and the equality of opportunity for everybody. I see a lot of what's going on here I'm just sorry. I'm a man of faith. I was raised in the church. This stuff is satanic. That's what's at the foundation of a lot of this stuff.
Well, I'm a pretty mild Protestant personally, but I completely agree with you, especially the gender stuff. When you say you can change your own gender by wishing it, you're saying you're God. And that is satanic. I completely agree. You know. Anyway, Jason Whitlock,
Tucker,
one of the few people who will say something like that on TV, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Jason Whitlock. Well, a senior official at ICE just quit his job because he was told he could not enforce the law. He joins us with a report on what that was like. Right now on TuckerCarlson.com, you can order a copy of the long slide sign. We'll be right back.
Every time the chute opens, my life gets very simple. The bull's job is to buck me off, and it's my job to hang on, no matter what. They say it's the most dangerous 8 seconds in sports, but one thing is certain. Chances are I'm gonna be hurting tomorrow. I know you were never gonna get on a bull, but how about taking those nice long walks again, or gardening? I was skeptical that anything that's 100% drug-free could be tough enough for my pain. But then I tried Relief Factor, and now I depend on it every day to help me get out and stay out of pain. If you work hard for a living like I do, or if everyday aches and pains slow you down, do what I did and order the 3-week Quick Start. You can get started for just $19.95. Order today at ReliefFactor.com or call 800-4RELIEF. You'll be glad you did.
How often do you get a good night's sleep? I'm tossing and turning, and I'm worried, and I have anxiety.
According to a major publication, lack of sleep can impair your memory and concentration, cause weight gain and depression.
I wake up in the morning and I feel so groggy.
Wouldn't you like to get the kind of deep, rejuvenating, uninterrupted slumber that leaves you feeling refreshed in the morning and ready to take on the day? Introducing safe, gentle, natural Relaxium Sleep. Developed by a renowned neurologist, Dr. Eric Celeberity, Relaxium is a true breakthrough in sleep science.
Relaxium Sleep has changed my life. It's a great natural alternative to anything that's out there, and it works.
Its triple action formula contains a proprietary blend of ingredients, which first regulates the natural sleep cycle, then relaxes the body, and finally calms the mind. In a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial, Relaxium Sleep was proven to help you fall asleep 140% faster. You'll be 260% more likely to sleep through the night, 69% more refreshed and alert, and experience 80% improved concentration.
With Relaxium Sleep, I woke up alert with no after effects.
And it's 100% guaranteed to work. We're so confident that Relaxium will work for you that we're giving away 1,000 bottles today. You deserve a good night's sleep, so call now and try Relaxium Sleep risk-free for 30 days.
I work better, I'm more productive.
And if you call within the next 15 minutes, you'll also receive free expedited shipping on your order.
Thank God for Relaxium Sleep because it's truly changed my life.
To receive your risk-free 1-month supply of Relaxium Sleep and free expedited shipping, call 800-417-3773 or visit tryrelaxium.com. That's 800-417-3773 or visit tryrelaxium.com. Fall asleep, stay asleep, wake refreshed with clinically proven Relaxium Sleep. Act now.
Attention farm, orchard, or vineyard workers who now suffer from Parkinson's disease.
If you worked on a farm, orchard, or vineyard and now suffer from Parkinson's, the herbicide paraquat may be to blame.
Call us right now. Your financial compensation may be substantial.
Call now, and in less than 2 minutes you can find out if you may qualify.
Call 1-800-579-8686. That's 1-800-579-8686.
Investors, the best hedge is hard assets with lower risk and higher returns, including steady cash flow. The NRIA Prime Real Estate Fund pays a 10% monthly distribution plus targeted returns to 21%. Our fund diversifies against stock market risk with over $1 billion of new development value in progress. The Fed has plummeted interest rates, so hedge against inflation and stocks dropping. Call for our free investors report, Flow with the Fed. Call 800-800-1414. That's 800-800-1414.
My name is Randall. As I was getting older, I felt like I wasn't getting some of the nutritions that I should just from my diet. I was having some health issues, and the dermatologist had recommended a medicine that was about $4,000 a month. He said that once I started the medicine, I would not be able to get off of it, even if the condition improved. I obviously couldn't afford it, but as I read and listened to different things, Balance of Nature was the best out there to help me with my health and my immune system. Taking Balance of Nature helped my body and has actually saved me a lot of money. As a matter of fact, I haven't had a sick day, period, from when I started taking Balance of Nature.
Start your journey with the best fruit and vegetable product. Call 1-800-246-8751 or go to balanceofnature.com. And don't forget to get 35% off your first order as a preferred customer by using discount code Fox News.
Tucker Carlson Originals, exclusively on Fox Nation. Now, Tucker uncovers the mystery of UFOs.
They've been well documented by our government for many years.
This is now real science.
The evidence 100% contradicts what the U.S. government and the military wants us to believe.
Will government officials finally tell us what they know?
It's enough to make your jaw hit the floor.
New episode of Tucker Carlson Originals, streaming now. Part of Fox Files, all this month on Fox Nation.
Until recently, Thomas Feely was the director of ICE in the state of New York. He just quit after more than 30 years because he was told he could not enforce the law. We spoke to Thomas Feely for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today about what's going on inside our government. Here's part of the conversation.
So it's another Biden crisis that they've made that's going to impact the people of the United States and the interior, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not 2 weeks from now, But what about a year from now?
Or how about over the next 50 years?
Right. It's good. And, let's talk about chain migration. Every illegal that comes in is going to bring 9 or 10 family members with them. Because that's how our country works. So, when you say 50,000 people have been let into the United States, well, you might as well go multiply that by 10. Because when it's all said and done with chain migration, they're going to bring all their family members here. But you never hear about it.
For the free health care, the free schools.
Absolutely.
The free everything.
Yep.
You really do see the system collapsing.
It is. And I'm just appalled that nobody wants to stand up and say anything. I get it. You all work for President Biden.
I don't get it at all. I think it's disgusting. I think they're cowards. Yeah. I think they should be ashamed, and I think they'll be judged for this. Because what a betrayal of the country they claim to protect.
It really is.
What a conversation that was. Thomas Feely of ICE just left and has a very clear description of what's going on there now. It'll infuriate you. It's a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today on Fox Nation. So we're now down to 22 days until the California recall. This is democracy in action. We don't have to live like this. Our cities don't need to look like this. We don't need leaders who don't care about us, who violate their own rules because they feel like it. There is a recourse. It's called voting. 22 days till our biggest state has a chance to change course and save itself. Not that the stakes are high. That's it for us tonight. We'll be back every night, 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn and sincere enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. Have the best night with the ones you love. Sean Hannity takes over right now.
All right, and Tucker, thank you, and welcome to Hannity.